Tough Topics, Kutztown University Radio's monthly community interest radio magazine, discussing issues few other shows are discussing. Addressing women's and LGBTQ+ issues, Tough Topics takes a deep look into issues that affect our lives. And now, from the Kutztown University Radio studios, your host of Tough Topics, Trisha.
Hey everyone, you're listening to KUR and you're about to listen to Tough Topics. This is the first episode of the spring semester. Welcome back if you are tuning in and you're continuing on with the journey that we bring to you every first Friday of the month. I'm Trisha. I am your host for this show. I have with me Jasmine and Maya. I'm going to go ahead and let Jasmine introduce herself, and then Maya is going to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm a junior at KU. I am a psychology major, and I work at the Women's Center as a UA.
And I'm Maya. I am also a junior at Kutztown. I am a social work major with minors in psychology and also women, gender, sexuality studies. I work with Jasmine in the Women's Center as a UA as well, and I'm also the president of the Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance here on campus.
Awesome. I'm super excited to have them here with me today. I think they're going to both bring extremely important perspectives on our topic that we're going to talk about. So, previous episode that I did that I think is kind of similar, but actually quite different is the previous episode was on gender nonconforming and femininity and like what that looks like and how they also don't always intersect with each other. And so today's topic is actually going to be about the intersection / like the lack thereof of intersection between race and femininity and being a feminist, or as we'll actually introduce to you today, the concept of being a womanist instead. So yeah, and as I like to do the weird, okay, if you just Google search that, what would it give you kind of thing. So, I just threw out there a whole new concept of what a womanist would be, or even what womanism is. So if you literally just Google, let's see, womanism, Google definition is a form of feminism that emphasizes women's natural contribution to society, used by some in distinction of the term feminism and its association with white women. This is one of the first times that I'm really talking about this concept. I didn't really know about it until this week. So when did you guys kind of learn and like really digest this new concept? Well, I don't even know if it's that new.
So for me, I kind of ran into it actually with gaining my position at the Women's Center. I wanted to have a better understanding of feminism and what it meant to be a feminist. And from there, I ran into womanism and the womanist theory and what it meant as a person of color. When I was in high school, we discussed the feminist movement, but we never discussed womanism. And obviously there was some sort of divide between being a person of color and being a woman and which battle you're supposed to fight when. So that's how I got introduced to it. And from there, I just went deeper into it.
Yeah, I can relate to that kind of experience. I'm still, a young scholar navigating through my education. And I think to understand how I got started learning about womanism, you have to understand how I got started learning about feminism. For me, I kind of knew of feminism in high school. It was kind of like the experience of being a Twitter feminist, retweeting, liking things, that kind of exposure. But when I came to Kutztown, it became through the organization that I'm president of now, the Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance, FMLA. I think that's how I got more involved in like learning about the theory and actually putting it into practice, the concept of feminism. So my freshman year, I was invited to go to a national feminist conference in Washington, D.C. With Kutztown's chapter, which was a really interesting experience. And at that conference, I attended a Black feminist caucus. So it was just like a whole bunch of people who identified as a Black feminist in a room talking to each other. And someone said, well, why don't you identify as a womanist? And I honestly like didn't really know what that was till I went back and looked into it and researched. And I think that's when I had my first exposure with it. But since then, I've just kind of been reading about it. I do identify as a Black feminist, but I can strongly connect to a lot of things in the womanist movement. And I think that the womanist movement is really valid. I appreciate it, and I appreciate people that consider themselves a womanist. In addition to or instead of a feminist, I think womanism is a great thing.
I love that. I feel like both of you just kind of spoke on a general experience of kind of being very aware of the feminist movement and all of that. But there's also been a general knowledge that like the feminist movement itself was a predominantly like white woman movement. And there wasn't necessarily the most inclusion of Black women. And some of the articles that I was reading on mentioned like we're recognizing that the feminist movement is just not simply enough. Did you in any of your experiences like ever feel excluded from the feminist movement, but just kind of didn't have the language for it and that we do have now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess to me, at least in my individual perception, that's kind of the key difference between the two. Is womanism is made by Black women for Black women, and it capitalizes on like the racial component. Personally, I do think that there is a strong history of anti-Blackness within the feminist movement. I think that current feminists have done a lot to correct that, leaning in the direction of intersectionality and kind of like an increase in white allyship, I think has done a lot for the feminist movement to steer away from that anti-Blackness. But I guess the fact of the matter is it's still there. It happened. Black women were excluded from the conversation, and within some circles of feminism still are excluded from the conversation. So I think that womanism has a lot of value in that it is a space very specific for Black women. For Black women, they take the lead. So yeah, I guess that's how I feel on it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's the outright divide is more so historically, where again, Black women were excluded, and even though it was in a fight for women, it was particularly in a fight for white women. I think now it's not as outright, but I don't know if it's the same for Maya, but it's like a low buzz. Like you can feel it when you go to a feminist walk or you're in a group of feminists and, you know, everyone's laughing and talking, but it's like you still feel like the outsider. So I think it's more so the underlying things and like the microaggressions and the changes in tone when we're talking about Black women. I think that's more so where it comes from today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's an exhausting existence, you know?
I feel like it's a constant, like there's this constant need to try to validate your seat at the table when like that shouldn't even be the thing, because the whole idea of the feminist movement was to just provide a seat for women. Mm-hmm. And so I can imagine why that's like super frustrating and super exhausting at the end of the day. I just had a thought while we were like chatting a little bit. We keep throwing around the term intersectionality, and I don't know if people just generally know what that means. And I even struggle to define it because I know it as like a thing, I guess. Do either of you feel like you have a solid like definition of what intersectionality is? Maya, you can take a stab at that if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess intersectionality was a theory developed by Kimberly Crenshaw back in like the third wave of feminism. And I guess the best way to describe it would be the understanding that there are multiple things that connect to make up a single person's identity. There's things that are a part of each individual person that can provide them with privilege, but can also oppress them. And so I think intersectionality is understanding that different factors are at play, like maybe gender or race or immigration status, sexuality, all kinds of a variety of things go together to make a person.
Yeah, I agree with that. And going further, I feel like for the individual, it's being comfortable in being whatever you are at the same time, not having to choose to be Black first or a woman first or a part of the LGBTQ community first. It's just being a person first.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Jasmine, because when we've had initial conversations and when the topic itself was like brought to my attention, that concept to me was very foreign, and that's because I'm white and I have that white privilege of not having to choose which identity comes first. I would love to hear more about that. I think definitely.
Yeah, so I'm experiencing that now. For instance, with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the protests in honor of George Floyd. And of course, Black women are out there and we're reposting and we're speaking out on the situation. But for me personally, it wasn't reciprocated in the death of Breonna Taylor. The outpour of love and care for the family of George Floyd was beautiful. And seeing us come together, the Black community as a whole, even in, some of the negativity that was present in it as well, seeing the positive and seeing millions of people all across the world, come out in support of the Black community was beautiful. But it wasn't the same for Breonna Taylor. You could hear her name in the background. You may have seen pictures, but it just wasn't the same actions. The actions weren't the same. The time spent on remembering her and honoring her wasn't the same. And I feel like with both of them now, it's died down for a lot of people. It's been forgotten, and even especially with celebrities and with social media, and it becomes a hashtag and everyone wants to repost it and talk about how it was an injustice, but then it's forgotten. So I feel like it's another case of Black women being left in the shadows.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you just said. But I think that's another positive to womanism, is that womanism recognizes that black men do go through a lot of oppression and a lot of things in our society, and I think it really aligns itself with Black men, and I think that that's something that a lot of people really gravitate towards.
I feel like you just touched on the fact that being a womanist, one of its main things, it is looking at, being inclusive to everyone in the Black community, which we don't see that in the feminist movement. Like, it's very exclusive to just women. And so that's an interesting point. I don't know if I would have ever thought about that positive. But Jasmine, I definitely I feel like I noticed that, but would have not put the two together in terms of that's what this is in terms of womanism and things like that. Like when George Floyd was murdered and then all of Breonna Taylor stuff came to the surface, I was like, wait, her death was not a while ago, but it was before his. I was like, why was there not as much momentum and as much I guess you said, actions towards getting justice for her. And yeah, I definitely, it was all of the social media stuff was very interesting to me, because there would be people that were when when the protests are done, like, don't forget, like, these still are like a thing. Like, you need to still be like actively working towards justice and making changes and all of that. And of course, we saw the decrease in social media presence on it and all of that, unfortunately, which I think, I don't, maybe you'd agree with this, that in itself, like the lack of, or like the decrease in social media presence over time is another example of like womanism and like why it's needed and why, you know, that whole point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And Maya, you did make a good point because, like we were saying, you know, this shows that the womanist movement pushes for intersectionality to, you know, be a thing, I guess, because again, it is hard to be a part of different demographics at the same time. You know, it feels like you always have to fight for one thing at this time when it's appropriate, and you don't want to make it about you. And, you know, you have to understand that there are people who have problems outside of your problems, but it's like, then when do I come in? When is it okay to be this thing? What time am I going to be recognized? Is this part of me going to be recognized? So yeah.
Maya, I didn't know if you wanted to share any experiences that you've had with like having to choose a different identity that you identify with, or if you're, and I should have mentioned this earlier to both of you, like if you don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with, because my mentality is like, it shouldn't take someone sharing their own personal experience with racism, with sexism, with all of those like injustices to get other people to care. That's one of my biggest pet peeves when I talk about sexual assault. Like, you shouldn't need personal stories to care about others. So yeah, feel free to share whatever you want. I just wanted to give you an opportunity, Maya, to share.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to speak on that a little bit. If you know me personally, you know that my whole life is a constant push and pull between different groups. And so just a little background, I am a biracial woman. So my dad is Black, my mom is white, and there's a lot of push and pull just between being a part of those two groups. It's hard to feel like you can never fully identify with one or the other. I was raised by my mom, so there was a lot of time spent just around white people, right? And I think I find a lot of comfort in educating myself more on womanism because I think it helps me to feel connected to maybe parts of Black culture that I didn't feel exposed to maybe in my childhood, and I'm trying to become exposed to now. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that. For me personally, I'm a Black woman. I'm fully Black, but I'm pretty light skinned. So for me, it was like, where does that fit in the community? You know, when you can pass, quote unquote, when you're just Black enough to be accepted. You know, when does that come in, and what do I do with that? And my father, he was always big on educating us about our culture. But when I was younger, you know, I just didn't care. I didn't pay it much attention. And I'll say when I was about maybe 16, that was when I started to realize the difference. That was when I started to recognize that, you know, it is a problem being a woman and a person of color. Like, that is a different struggle, you know, it's hard to express properly. Especially for people of other cultural backgrounds or um, males, especially. I find that that's the most difficult for me. So um, I think that's the main thing is finding that comfort level where, again, you can be all that you are in this society, in the America that we live in today.
I really like the way you ended that. You know, just finding that place that you feel like you can be your most empowered self and be your most amazing self and all of that. Maya, I think you mentioned having some quotes from Alice Walker. So if you don't know this, Alice Walker is the original person to coin the term womanist. So she had some interesting points that we were going to discuss as well.
Yeah, I just thought it would be really important to bring this all back to Alice Walker's original definition from 1983 of what a womanist is. So this is a multiple part, so we're just going to go through it part by part. First it says, from womanish, opposite of girlish, frivolous, irresponsible, not serious. A Black feminist or feminist of color. From the Black folk expression of mothers to female children, you act in womanish, like a woman, usually referring to outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior, wanting to know more and in greater depth than is considered good for one, interested in grown-up doings, acting grown-up, being grown-up, interchangeable with another Black folk expression, you're trying to be grown. Responsible, in charge, serious.
So I feel like I heard a part of that definition that I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I felt, and I don't know if I necessarily remember this, but like if I can like recite that part, but I feel like I heard a part that was like not hinting, but like referring to women, like Black women acting, feeding into that stereotype. That's the wording I wanted. I was like, part of it felt like it was feeding into the stereotype that Black women are like these exotic, high energy women. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know, maybe you guys didn't hear it the same way that I did. I don't even know if I can tell you which part it was.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I hear it the same way that you do, but that is a really interesting point of discussion, because I think, almost referencing what Jasmine said earlier, it is a very hard experience to kind of take that identity as a Black woman and be unique to yourself and not feel like you have to be a goddess or an extremely strong woman that can handle anything. Like, that's a lot of pressure, and that's a lot of pressure that society puts on Black women every day. Jasmine, you had something to say.
Yeah, I think for me it depends on how it's what's the word I'm looking for? How it's given, right? Because sometimes when it's like, oh, Black women are so strong, it's like, for me, there's no way you know the history behind that strength. There's no way you understand why Ruby Bridges is seen as one of the strongest women to ever walk this planet, one of the strongest Black women, because the strength is rooted in hurt, where it's like you had no choice but to get up every day and provide for your family, even though you cried through the night and couldn't get any sleep. So I think that's, it's depending on how you give it. If it comes off as fetishizing, where it's like, oh, Black women are strong and powerful, for me, that's what gets the side eye, when you fail to acknowledge the reasoning behind the strength.
Yeah, totally heard. That kind of transitions well into the next part of Walker's definition. So the second part says, a woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually, appreciates and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility, values tears as natural counterbalance of laughter, and women's strength.
Yeah, I definitely think that brings together, what I was trying to say. Because at the end of the day, I feel like it's not recognized how accepting Black women are. When there's nothing like going to your aunt's house and hearing her call you baby and give you the one of the warmest hugs, and I feel like it's not recognized that she would give that hug to any and everybody. If you ever needed a hug or someone to talk to, I promise you there's a Black aunt out there who's there to listen to you, who's there to hug you and cry with you and give you a plate of food. So yeah, I definitely feel like that needs to be pushed more. Just that it's we want to be accepted too. We don't want to just have us. We want to have everyone, and everyone is welcome.
Totally agreed. I love and relate to that warmth. Oh my goodness. I miss getting to connect with relatives and feeling that. The next part of the definition says, sometimes loves individual men sexually and or non-sexually, committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, male and female, not a separatist, except periodically for health, traditionally universalist.
Yeah, I think that goes along with what you said before, where womanism is about everyone. It's not just for Black women, it's about accepting everyone.
I like the part where she says, not a separatist, except periodically for health. I think that's really interesting because it is known in the Black community that mental health is definitely under discussed, and so I think that that's something that um, Black women and Black folk in general really need to think about. Just all of us as a population, that it is okay to take time for our health, our physical health, our mental health, and I just think that's under discussed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I promise I'm not biased because I'm a psych major. I think that's just not a topic that it's almost taboo to talk about mental health in the Black community. And I know there's so many people that feel like they could never tell their family, I need help or I need someone to talk to. And I've been feeling down, especially even with the pandemic. And yeah, I can definitely resonate with that. I've realized that I have to be more open with my family because they are there for me constantly. My mom and my dad and my brothers, they're always there whenever I need someone to talk to. And I feel like it's there's so many people that are walking around every day and they're struggling and no one knows because they're so afraid to reveal themselves in that way.
Yeah, I can relate to that. One time I was having a conversation with my dad, and he told me that Black people don't talk about mental health because Black people don't have time to talk about mental health. We were talking about how there's this constant struggle. There's always a hustle and survival mode. That's pretty general among the community. He also he was like, it's just not something that we discuss. Like Uncle Joe doesn't have anxiety, depression. Uncle Joe's just crazy, in quotations. Like that's something that he told me.
Yeah, that's definitely something that really needs to be brought up more. I think that's something that not a lot of people care to discuss, and it's not acknowledged. The mental health issues within the community, and like for instance, with the recent issues with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, like that, I'm sure that's taken a toll. It's taken a toll on me. So I'm sure it's taken a toll on many other people. And I hope that, as time goes on, there's more space for mental health in the Black community.
Not to mention like generational trauma. Like it's absolutely insane. Like there's so much weight that Black people carry from day to day. Even things like microaggressions that just build up over time. Yeah, I would definitely agree with you that I hope in the near future, there's more space for Black people to discuss mental health.
I'm so glad
Yeah.
that.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. You go ahead.
And then having to explain why you feel the way you feel on a day-to-day basis, that definitely doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah. So I'm like over here in my like counseling brain, I'm like loving this conversation. For my one class for my master's in clinical mental health counseling, I had to read 2 books, and one of the books that I chose to read was called Willow Weep for Me, and it's a Black woman's experience with depression. And one of the things that she really talked about was that bias of like that Black women are perceived as these strong, independent females, and so they shouldn't have to like ask for help, and they shouldn't be having depression, and they should be able to handle this, and like all of those different biases and stereotypes. And as much as we can be aware of them, we still absorb them sometimes. And so that's a part of that. And I think y'all both really just hit the nail on the head of like, you guys don't have time to like think about taking care of your mental health if you have to constantly think about how to survive in our society. And like, that hurts my heart. And I really also am with you guys on the, like, I really hope that we make a bigger move towards getting that taken care of. I feel like that's a great, pausing point for us to take a break. You're listening to Tough Topics on KUR. Your host is Trisha, and we will be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to KUR, and the show is Tough Topics. I'm your host, Trisha. We just got back from a quick break. We were talking a lot about what it means to be a womanist, and mental health, and just all of that fun stuff. We were also discussing the original definition from Alice, I'm like blanking on her name.
Alice Walker.
Thank you, Alice Walker. I was like, water? And anyway, Alice Walter's original definition of what a womanist is, because it's like multiple components, and we're about to finish up the last 2.
Yeah, so I'm just going to transition us into Walker's third point of the definition, and I think it's super cute. I love it. She wrote, "A womanist loves music, loves dance, loves the moon, loves the spirit, loves love and food and roundness, loves struggle, loves the folk, loves herself regardless." And I think just reading that gives me a lot of happiness. It brings a lot of joy to my heart. It makes me think of my sisters and my aunts and stuff like that. I just think it's super, super sweet and happy, and capitalizes on the community, like Jasmine and I were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I definitely love that. It makes me think about family reunions and seeing our aunts do the line dances, and them cooking, and on holidays when everybody gets together. That's what it makes me think of. And I love the last 2 lines, loves herself regardless, because again, it can be hard to remember who you are, and it's easy to lose yourself when there's so much going on and there's so much expected from you. So I feel like it's almost like I can't remember the phrase, but it's like the bird rising from the fire. I feel like it's like that. It's like, despite everything that women go through, you know, they still rise regardless.
Totally. And then the very last part of her definition says, womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. And I think that just kind of capitalizes how they're cut from the same cloth, but there are differences and both can exist. Both can be important, but I just think that womanism is nice because it creates a specific place.
I definitely agree, and I feel like it's appreciating that they're both beautiful in their existence, both womanism and feminism. You know, there's still again a place for both. Yeah, I love that line too.
So like, I know there's a place for both, but I also feel like, what if like womanist, like, if we want true intersectionality, do we have them separated, or do we have them like kind of come together as one, as the ultimate goal? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. I feel like over time that could happen, but I feel like there needs to be a sense of trust built between the two, where there's true, where the actions meet the words, where it's more than just, oh, I love you and I accept you and you're always welcome here as a woman, and where you're not just loving me and accepting me as a woman, but everything I am in between as well. You know, as a Black woman, as an Asian woman, as a trans woman, you're loving me in everything that's included in that.
Yeah, I definitely think that that totally makes sense. And so that's why I asked her, I was like, because I get the need for like the separation of like, there needs to be that space. But then like, we also talk a lot about intersectionality and like making them come together. But I think I think you used these words, I could be wrong, supporting each other. Or maybe that was something I thought in my head, I don't know. But I guess my next question would be then, like, how do we support each other? How do we support both of the movements at the same time? How do we, I guess, like, really be an ally to each other and like make sure we're actually putting our actions in, or our words into actions, and everything like that?
I think that allyship is a really important tool. So we talked about earlier in the womanist movement how Black men play an integral part. There's a lot of allyship, there's support. So I think something that is most important, probably above everything else, for white allyship, white female allyship, is allowing for Black women to share their own stories and to take the floor to talk for themselves. I think that that is the most powerful thing that an ally can effectively do, is saying, hey, this isn't my story to tell. This is your moment. How about you share how you feel, your thoughts? And I think that that would be very powerful.
I definitely agree with that. And situations like this, Trisha, where you're allowing us to have a place to share our stories, as Maya said, because this is a tough topic, no pun intended. But yeah, this is a tough topic, and it's hard for us to share our voice without it being seen as the, you know, the stereotype of an angry Black woman. And there's actually a poem, I love poetry, and there's a poem by Portia O called Angry Black Woman, and please excuse the language in it, but it kind of breaks down the reasoning behind the anger, so to speak, and the challenges that Black women face every day, and why it can come off as an attitude. And going further with that, I personally don't like the assertion of not seeing color, because to me it's like you have to and see my color and my cultural differences and understand that there are differences that I face, you know, down to my hair, down to the way I speak, or, you know, my facial expressions, why those can be be a hindrance, you know, in my everyday endeavors. Realize that and realize how you can help me to get my point across with the privilege that you have.
Yeah, I feel like at one point FMLA held an event. I think it was maybe take the mic. Was that a thing? I don't know. I could be wrong. There was an event that was held, and it was kind of like a spoken word event, and it was trying to highlight, like, or at least my understanding of it was to like give the mic to the person that has the knowledge and the experience in the situation and all of that. I feel like that is definitely a motto or a mentality that I've tried to kind of advocate for other communities, such as like the trans community or the LGBTQ community. Like, if you know you're in the room with a person in that community, you hand that mic over and you say, here, like, you get to talk now, because I don't need to talk. Yeah, I've kind of worked a little hard to try to be as inclusive and be as open and to all topics and talk about the things that aren't being talked about. Like I said, this is the first time I'm even learning about what it is to be a womanist in that community and that group. And it's been really awesome, like, listening to both of you talk about your experiences and like what has empowered you and those fun memories that you have of like family reunions and your aunts and things like that. It's been very heartwarming. Yeah, I feel like earlier you had, Jasmine, you had said about how finding the place that you're comfortable and that you feel comfortable to be yourself. And I wanted to also give both of you an opportunity to talk about when you felt like you didn't have to choose an identity, when you got to just be you and be yourself comfortably in the space that you were in. So yeah.
So for me, this happened recently where I kind of had to choose not to choose. I had to choose to be a Black woman. I had to choose to be both, because both of those topics are so integral to me as a person. That's what I identify as, you know, that's my identity. But when I was younger, and for instance, the Sandra Bland case, that's from a few years ago, and seeing that and, you know, hearing people talk about it, it was like, okay, well, you know, I see people discussing it. And it was, again, like I said before, the same situation with Breonna Taylor, where it just kind of dwindled away. And for instance, I'm gonna bring in a pop culture reference, the Megan Thee Stallion situation. It's like now she's become like public enemy number one, and there's no, well, let's see what happens and see if this story is true and see who was telling the truth. I feel like that's not present. So I feel like it's always a question when it comes to Black women. It's always, well, did she do this? And, well, did she have an attitude? Well, what did she say to him? So I think that's when I have that struggle. But now it's like, I'm unapologetic for my stance as a Black woman. I'm unapologetic for my identity as a Black woman. So, and I feel like eventually every Black woman has to hit that point, because currently, right now, there is somewhat of a divide from both communities. So I feel like you have to hit that point where it's like, this is who I am, and you're going to accept me for both identities.
I hear all that totally. I think all that is really, really important. I'm going to kind of talk about a different end of it. I think a time that I felt really strong in my role as a Black woman. Like I said before, in my personal experience, when I was younger, I was raised mainly by my mom, who's a white woman. But when I got a little bit older, like early middle school, my mom remarried, and I got a black dad. And I think a point in time when I felt really confident and comfortable in that identity, where I didn't feel like I had to choose, was having those first I guess you could say meetups with his family, which became my family, and my aunt showing me how to do my hair and take care of it, protect it, things like that. I remember feeling really empowered in my identity in moments like that, and having long conversations with my stepdad, who I call my dad, having long conversations with my dad about politics and police brutality and things like that, and him just telling me what he knows and bringing me into his world and making it become my world too. So I think those are really fond memories of just being in middle school and getting to be introduced to things and being brought, I guess, more into that culture than I was before. So those are really good memories for me.
I'm glad that both of you shared those memories and those experiences. And I feel like each of you have experienced something that kind of really pushed you to feel empowered, to really take on that identity and really accept it, like you said, Jasmine, unapologetically. And I hope that in the future, both of the movements continue to kind of, I hope, work together and lift each other up and lift the Black community up and all of that, because we need it. Yeah, I feel like that was a good note to end on, I feel. Before we really wrap it up, I'm going to do a quick event plug. And then if there's anything you guys want to say before we end it, I'll give you an opportunity to do that. But for the rest of February, what we got going on, the next thing that's going on is on February 12th, starting at 10 a.m., the Gender and Sexual Minorities Conference is happening. For more information, definitely check out the LGBTQ plus Resource Center's Instagram page. Check out Engage. All of our events are on Engage. So if you ever want more information, go there. That will have the whole lineup of the day, all of that. And then on February 17th at 11 a.m. till 4 p.m., we have a Love Your Body Day event series. There's a whole lineup of things happening between different discussions and activities of loving your body. And then we'll end our day with a midweek meditation. And yeah, I think that's what I got for events this month. You go ahead, Maya.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite anybody who might be listening and interested. We do have FMLA, Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance, every Tuesday at 11 on Zoom. And you can find more information and Zoom codes and everything on our Instagram, which is FMLA_Kutztown.
Because we won't have an opportunity to advertise Feminist Friday again, the next one is on March 5th, also at 1 to 2 p.m. Sorry, I was like, what time am I looking for? And so if you want to join, definitely feel free to join those. They're a lot of fun. It's a great time to take care of yourself and have some good conversations and things like that. But if neither of you have anything else you would like to throw out there, go ahead, Jasmine.
I just wanted to thank you, Tricia, for allowing us to have this platform again. And for people out there who are listening, if you have a privilege, whether that be due to your gender, your sexual orientation, your class, whatever the case may be, just know that you definitely can use it for good, and please do so, because it's definitely appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Remember that allyship is about action, and not so much like you can say that you support communities of, diverse communities all you want, but if you're doing something about it, you're perfect. If you're kind of struggling, reach out to someone. You can reach out to anyone at the Women's Center or even at the LGBTQ plus Resource Center about how to be a better ally in all communities. We would love to have that conversation with you. Thanks, Jasmine and Maya. I'm really glad that you both were able to come and have a conversation with me. I really enjoyed this. This is my first time hosting a show that had 2 guests on it, so I really enjoyed this dynamic a lot. So yeah. Thanks for having us, Trisha. Yeah, no problem. This is the first episode of Tough Topics on KUR. I was your host, Trisha, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.